Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today. This is the fourth episode of our newly launched webinar series, Psychological Safety in Focus. We took a small break during the end of year holidays and are now resuming with our weekly webinar series. If you are listening to us for the first time, here's a bit of context. At Cosmic Centaurs, psychological safety has been a core part of our work for many years, shaping how we design organizational assessments, leadership programs, and even how we operate internally. It's central to our belief that teams perform at their highest when people feel safe enough to speak up, ask questions, share concerns, and learn together. In this episode, I have the pleasure of welcoming a guest with me. Hi, Mazuba. Mazuba Haanyama is an independent consultant who has over 15 years of experience at the intersection of tech, government, corporations, and civil society. She works towards creating innovative strategies that ensure positive social impact. She has a keen ability and interest in influencing public policy, navigating complex regulatory landscapes while working on designing and implementing large scale programs. In this webinar of the Psych Safety in Focus series, Mazuba and I will be talking about her experience running the psychological safety scan with her team, why she chose to run the scan, how it helped her and her team better understand their environment, and extract insights about the experience and the type of conversations that followed. We really hope that this conversation will give you a clear idea of what running the psych safety scan looks like in real time. Mazuba, we're very happy to have you with us, and thank you so much for your willingness to share.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I think this is an important conversation, and so I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Let's start off with you talking to us a bit about how did you hear about psych safety? Like many leaders hear about it via different points in time in their journey, and sometimes it's linked to a specific challenge they are facing. Sometimes it's just curiosity. So tell us a bit more, like what first brought you to psychological safety?
I guess I learned about it as something that can be actually measured, assessed, worked on through you guys, through Cosmic. Um, I was working with a team, and there were questions about whether folks were feeling psychologically safe. I had recently come back from maternity leave, and there were lots of changes in the company. And I really wanted to make sure that we were kicking off the year in a positive way. And so, in conversation with you all, I kind of raised that this has come up in the team, and how can I think about addressing it? How can I work on it in an intentional way? And you all were like, well, actually, we are psych safety experts, and we can help you kind of walk through it. And that's how I came to understand that it has very particular tenets, and it can be measured, and something that I can look at in a deliberate way.
Nice. Yeah, I love how you said like it like I felt that something was happening, or I wanted to start with on the right note, because in a lot of cases some leaders come to us when something is broken, but that doesn't need to be the case. Like there's always something to do with the team dynamics. There's always something to improve. There's always things that are maybe sometimes beneath the surface that we can talk about and just make us that will make us a better team. So it doesn't need to be like something like very challenging is happening. It can be both the situation and like ideally it will really help improve how the team collaborates and work together. That's actually one of the objectives. And did you have any worries like when you started thinking about it and pitched it to the team? Were you faced with any questions around why we're doing this?
Well, just to come back to something you said just before this, around there not having to be something broken for you to think about psychological safety. I think through the process of working on this with you all, and we'll talk more about it, I have understood the value of just assessing the psychological safety of a team regularly, whether it's once a year, whether it's every few years, whether it's quarterly, whatever the case might be for the appropriateness of the team. But it's like a great way to level set any group dynamic, right? Like no matter what's going on. I think that was one of the key takeaways. I might be jumping the gun, but that was one of the things I remember thinking like, oh, this is really great practice just to
Yeah,
maintain like, you know, good team hygiene, and
totally.
then I didn't have any concerns per se about kind of introducing it, just because I think that there's probably how should I put it? I think there's an assumed understanding of what psychological safety might be,
Mm.
and perhaps folks don't know that there are folks who researched it. It looks a very particular way. There's a way to measure it, and so I think everybody kind of assumed what it might be. Like I think it exists in like the cultural um, atmosphere. And so there wasn't a lot of resistance or pushback around it. I suggested it as something that I thought would help us and could just benefit the team generally. And people were mostly keen on that.
That's amazing. Actually, it's not always the case. Sometimes with some teams, we face some questioning or resistance,
Mm.
even though the survey can be run both anonymously or not. Even if it's anonymous, some people would want more like clarity about how is this information is going to be used. Um, should I be honest 100%? Is it a good idea actually to be honest? So that's where the prep work usually is important, like whether how the leader presents it, how the awareness we create, as you said, like not everyone has the same understanding of the concept. So making sure before we run the scan, the concept is clear, people understand what really psychological safety means, what's the purpose of the exercise. You said it could be a regular like team hygiene practice, and it could be other things depending on the context of the team. So making sure that the team is in the know, and like there's not like no hidden agenda of why we're running this scan. I
Yeah.
think that also contributes to having really the right honest answer of people and having good data around what's the current situation
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, maybe I didn't come up against resistance, which is not to say that people maybe didn't feel challenged about being
Mm,
honest, but I think, which is I think the benefit of doing it more than once or doing it at different times,
yeah,
that like the more you do it, perhaps more folks can see that there isn't backlash, to sharing honestly. Because I think in a workspace, when you're asked to share honestly about your experience of that space. And if it's a small team, it can be difficult, right? Like it's anonymous, but you think, or you might fear that things could be attributed back to you.
totally.
So I think fortunately, the team I was working with at the time, I think we had a general like degree of honesty and transparency, but for sure I wouldn't want to downplay that part around being honest is probably difficult, and it's something that you really got to work towards, which I think we'll also talk about when we actually kind of debrief on the session in
Yeah,
person.
totally, totally. I think the culture of the team really contributes, the leadership, the leader's attitude, and the trust that they build over time with the team. And that's actually a tool that help bring and build more trust, because we all trust that we want to do a better job as a team together. And even like if it comes with concerns, as you said, maybe the first time it might not be the exact, let's say, response we are looking for, but it's more important to have the conversations that come after. So that's what we
Yeah,
always say. Don't be concerned about the score or the number. What it is there to do is to actually bring you to the conversations that need to happen. And that was part of the debrief session we had together, and we're gonna talk more about it today. I just wanted maybe to take a 30 seconds to explain what the psych safety scan is really about before we get into the debrief phase, because just like to be clear that it's a survey. It is like 7 questions across 4 domains, which are the inclusion and diversity, the willingness to help, attitude to risk and failure, and open conversations. As I said, it can be run anonymously. So for the teams who want to take the Fearless Organization scan, who's the company behind the survey, they will only need to answer 7 questions. It's pretty short and straight to the point, and it really talks about the team. So it's really me as a part of the team talking about the environment of the team, whether it's there's, let's say, good inclusion and diversity, there's good willingness to help. I feel that this team like deals well with mistakes or with risk taking and have open conversations. So this is what the survey asks about. And then once the team takes the survey and we have the scores, which is like officially it's called the PSI, which is the Psych Safety Index score, we can have a more in-depth understanding of how we're doing as a team on psych safety in general, but we will also get the score at a domain level and understand maybe we're doing great on inclusion and diversity, but there's few more improvements to do. And on other domains, let's say like attitude to risk and failure, we feel differently about it, and then let's have a conversation. So that's what the data actually help us do, is really open the right conversations backed with data and have those conversations. And I really remember clearly the day we did the debrief with your team, and it really helped like resurface maybe team dynamics that have never been maybe mentioned, or things that the team really wanted to discuss together, and they had the space to do it. So looking back, like what do you think like really made this time that you spent together with the team like useful and conclusive?
Well, assuming it was useful for everyone, which is the feedback that we got, but let's hope that's correct.
Yeah.
I think a few things probably. I did my best to set up the day, right? That, that I was coming in with some fears and some nerves, that it's not always easy as a leader to kind of put yourself forward for not just criticism, but feedback, or to be willing to just open up the space for that in a safe way. And that I really wanted to encourage people to feel safe to share, that whatever was shared would be for the purpose of making the team better, and that if we got into our feels about things, that we would hold that gently. So I kind of took quite a bit of time in the beginning to set that up. I think you guys as facilitators also did a really important job in assuring us that you would hold space for moments or things that perhaps we got too in the weeds about, and that you would keep us on track, which I think we needed. Like, we couldn't have self-facilitated the conversation because we needed to all be in it. I think everybody on the day came with a really like good, as in like good intentioned perspective, and also a willingness to receive things that may be hard to hear, and a willingness to share things that will be hard to hear. So the room for me really felt like positively pointed, right? That like, we know it might get bumpy, but we're ready for it. We're going to be held well. Like, let's do it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can resonate 100%. I was in that room, and it was really beautiful to see, as you said, like how everyone was ready to have those conversations, even though they were difficult, because the environment and the context was set in the right way, whether in the way you as a leader opened the session, showing like full honesty, full vulnerability, inviting the same kind of attitude. The way the facilitator, as you said, like we facilitated this session with clear agreement to start with, assuming good intentions always, making sure that the conversation is moving in the right direction, giving space for everyone to speak, make sure everyone's voice is heard. Like all of these really, as you said, like would create the right setup to have these conversations and make it possible really to take the conversation where it needs to go. So always making sure that whenever a leader is considering running the scan, making sure that their team is well prepared, then they know what to expect in this session, what kind of mindset they need to have coming in before the session really starts. Like that's really, really important. And do you recall any like conversations or like any discussions that you feel were new to the team thanks to the scan?
I do think that there were perspectives that were surfaced that perhaps hadn't, even if they had been surfaced before, perhaps we came to hear them with new ears, and that perhaps not everybody was privy to that, right? So sometimes there's a dynamic between two or three people, maybe one person isn't privy to it. So it's certainly level set in that
Mm,
way. And also maybe things that I might have not understood as being a big issue, I got to hear differently. Or something that I thought was like, oh, this is the biggest thing that we're dealing with as a team. Everyone was like, no, that's not a thing, but look in this direction. So I don't think anything was, maybe for me, perhaps nothing felt entirely new, but I think even the things I thought would come up or I had heard before, I certainly heard them differently.
can you
Does
tell
that
us
make
a bit
sense?
more about it?
Yeah, I mean, like, without going into specifics, I think, like, you mentioned there's like conclusion, open conversation, willingness to contribute. I think there were some things that were like going really, really well for us and some things that needed adjusting. And, if you had asked me before, I would have been like, yeah, okay, sure, I see that thing. But I think I got to hear from everybody
Totally.
about those same topics in a way that you may not have, in a fast-paced environment. Maybe you're doing a one-on-one with somebody or in a group team call. There isn't a lot of time to get into a lot of detail. So I got to really hear people debrief on like, no, 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 I didn't think that when that thing was said. I actually thought this. It left me with this. And I was like, oh, okay. That's why you've been responding in this way. So it just illuminated what folks maybe have already said. And I think people even said, I've told you this 100 times. And I was like, I don't think I heard it quite clearly, like I'm hearing it now. So I think that came up, not only for me, I think for a lot of team members in the room.
Yeah, that's very powerful because, as I said, we might be saying those things to each other all the time. We might be close, like a close team. Like that doesn't mean that if sometimes we are all in our head, like we are overwhelmed with work, we have priorities, and we rarely take the time to have those discussions because they require like a specific mindset, like bandwidth, and like really willingness to hear, and sometimes we don't hear in the same way. And there was a complexity in the room. Like I remember, even though it was a small team, there was different expectations, different, as you said, levels of closeness between team members, and the space made it easier to discuss those dynamics in a way that is not taken personally. I think what was is more important is really to set the intention that we are here because we as a team, we are one unit and we want to function better together as one unit. And we are not here like to deal with like interpersonal maybe conflict, etc. That's not the purpose. And once these are out of the way, like you can see like people like physically they are relieved. Like you can see like shoulders going down, smiles coming back because it is, I think it's a relief when you feel that you're heard and when you see that other people feel the same way as you do. and we share, even if we have different perspectives, like there's common ground. And yeah, like I really remember, like that was nice
Mm. I
to
think
witness.
for sure. I think even as a leader, I felt maybe at times crucified, but also at times validated, that um that the intention that
Mhm.
I have tried to lead with was received, even if not by everybody in the same way all the time. I think I it was very validating for me and eye opening, right? Like it wasn't just we think you're doing all of this great, and I guess maybe too something else is made me think of that now. I felt like a team member, and
Nice.
sometimes when you're a team leader,
Totally.
that can be strange, and that people have different expectations, right? Like should you be a team member, should you not? I in all the teams I've led over time have always felt like, or at least tried to um, assert myself as a team member, with a mandate to lead, right? But it wasn't like I'm governing over people for whom I am not also accountable to, um, and responsible for.
It's beautiful when a leader is that intentional. Actually, the you touch upon, like, on a very important matter, because sometimes, depending on the context of the team, depending on the results we see in the scan, the conversation can be different. Sometimes we intentionally ask the leader not to be in the room because we feel that, depending on the culture as well, people may not feel comfortable to speak up. We see maybe like things in the data that gives us a hint that like some conversations need to happen in a free, let's say, way. And we also always try to get to know the team a bit better before we run the scan, because we want to, as facilitator, really be prepared for how we want to facilitate this. So we don't only like rely on the scan, we also try to do few interviews, talk with the leader a couple of times before getting in the room, and sometimes guide the leader in how they need to show up in this session. Sometimes you ask them just to listen. Sometimes you ask them, as you did, to be a team member. Sometimes you ask them to be the leader. So really, it depends, and that's the beauty of really using this information, that new information that you gained about the team, in a very specific way, like not being like unconscious of the context. Like, it is data for sure, but it's also really deep information about how some people might feel on the team. Because in the scan, you will see, like, don't only get the score, you get the deviation. Like, you can see if you have people on the team who feel exactly the opposite about one thing. And that is telling that there is a conversation to have on this. So, yeah, like, totally, as you said, like, really being intentional in the way we show up and the way we run the debrief, and in our intention, like, how do we want to progress this conversation, what are we getting out of this. So on top of the conversations and the insight, what is important is to get to, let's say, a commitment, or like to few actions that the team agree on doing. um, Anything that you recall, like, on what was really the impact or the outcome of this session for the team?
I mean, it was significant. I think maybe there were like immediate outcomes, and then sort of like medium and long term outcomes. I think immediately, something you mentioned earlier, I think there was like a massive sense of relief that, like, okay, something had been going on and we're addressing it. So I think there was a general feeling of safety around that. And then I think because we made quite explicit commitments to one another, there was a feeling of like trusting the process and the continuation of that process that we would be holding each other to account to. And I think maybe longer term, I think, at least from what I gathered, what I heard a bit, and how I felt myself, there was a feeling of like, if things should go awry, we have a process already
Mm,
for how we can address it, So we don't have to be hyper vigilant on how we're doing because we know the process, we've worked through the process, it seemed to work, we have it as a framework, which I think was really, really helpful just going forward.
nice. Nice. That brings me to a question from Zainab. How often do you think this scan or the survey could be run with the team? Because as you said, like we know that there's a process. We know that if there's something, there's a way, there's a framework we can deal with. So what would you say like is a good frequency or a good cadence for running this, doing this exercise?
I mean, I like to reflect, so my cadence will probably be more than a lot of people's, but I do think it depends on like the rhythmic nature of your organization, right? Like some organizations are really annual, right? They do a team building exercise once a year. They
Mm,
review once a year. I think it's helpful to slot it into other like cyclical rhythmic moments. So maybe it's every quarter for some if you are a team that is able to assess. I mean, 3 months is short, when you're working fast. I think at least once a year, I probably is wise because so much can change and happen in a year. I think twice a year is probably helpful, like whether you're sort of ending the year off and kind of debriefing on how things have been as you like go into the new year, and then just checking midway, right? We made some commitments to each other, have we kept them? If we haven't, what has prevented that? What do we need to do? Just to, you can't, holding one another accountable once a year is a bit difficult because you even forget like, what did we talk about? So even if you don't do it the full scan, every quarter, maybe you look at the commitments that you made on a quarterly basis, right? And then like assess from there, okay, should we do this in another 3 months or another 6 months? But as
yeah,
as much as you can keep it top of mind, the better.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And as you said, maybe just have a check in on the commitments because a lot, like we've seen that, like a lot of the outcomes of this session turn into a new ritual that we want to add as a team, a new process, something we want to change in the way we do together, something we want to change in the way we allocate, let's say, time on projects. I remember like one of the outcomes in the session with your team was, let's, before we kick off any project, let's clarify the roles and the territories and who needs to be involved and not at the beginning, so it's clear, like small things, like small habits that we want to add to the way we do things, more regular check-ins, etc. And in order not to forget about those actions or commitments, what we usually advise to do is to, let's say, appoint someone who's accountable to make sure that the team is actually doing this and have regular checks. So every quarter could be a good cadence depending on, as you said, how fast the team moves. Maybe something also disrupts. Sometimes we have a new joiners in the team. We have people leaving. Like sometimes the team dynamics changes because of any like external reason, and it's good to have those like health checks every now and then to make sure that we are going through something. Sometimes some of the actions, we test them, we see that maybe they're not working, we want to change something. So definitely, our advice is every 6 months actually is a good rhythm, usually. And then those follow-ups on the action plan are totally useful and necessary. And what I would like to add here is sometimes the survey gets integrated into other yearly checks. When it is done yearly, it gets
Mm.
integrated integrated, let's say, in other surveys because it's
Mm.
a short one. So let's put it part of our engagement survey. Let's put it part of our performance survey. And that's where
Sure.
we really advise not to go there because it is not a performance review
Yeah.
tool. It leads to great performance as a team, but it's more of a like a team building, team health, team check, all of these who are should be dissociated from individual performance. It's really about how the team is working together and how we can be more performing as one team. So that's something that I would really like to highlight because integrating it when other surveys like removes really the point of doing it. And people get survey fatigue. Like sometimes I understand, and for that reason they would say, "Okay, let's do it together." But sometimes it's a dangerous way of doing it. Not dangerous, but maybe you really lose the point.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that would be my advice. Like always dissociating it, having it as a standalone kind of exercise to do with the team. And it's not very long, so it's not very time consuming. We have another questions from Faten. Um, I think you touched upon it a bit in when we were talking about the debrief, but I'll take it again. I think maybe there's more to say here. So Faten asks you, were there any moments in the conversations after the scan result that prompted you to pause and reflect on your leadership approach?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. The whole time. Every time. Um, but post doing it, yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, I've been leading teams for a while, different types of teams and different locations at different organizations. And I think I've come to maybe accept and understand that it is my intention to be a strong, empathetic, compassionate, dependable leader. I think communication and accountability are probably two of the good communication are probably two of the biggest values I'm guided by. Yeah, good communication, accountability, and compassion, maybe three. But I say that because that may be my value, and the
Mm,
way that I communicate that value may not always lead to the outcomes or may not always convey the intention that I have. And I think this process was really helpful for me, right? That um, there are times when I like oscillate, right? That I want to like really lean into compassion. People have had a tough week, things are busy, there's a deadline. Okay, let's like push the deadline. But what that also communicates to the team is that if you catch it at the right moment, a deadline isn't really a deadline. Um, and so it helped me think about the value may stay the same, but the way that I um, enact that value really has to be consistent, and it has to
yes,
work for what I can continue with, right? That, cool, a deadline needs to move, no problem, but maybe that needs to be communicated in a contextual way. That like this deadline is moving, this is why, this is not what to expect going forward. So short answer, yes, certainly made me think, rethink my approach, but also helped me understand that like that's the kind of leader I want to be and am, right? That like I can absolutely like drive results, right? And perhaps people who've been on my teams have felt that, that compassion can be felt in some moments, and in some moments it doesn't really feel like it's there because I want to be effective and I want us to achieve what we set out to achieve. And I can be quite like long term in my thinking. And so really focus on what do we do now that's going to help us like in a year's time. So I sometimes need to figure out a way to marry like execution and compassion in ways that are a little bit more smooth. And I think that certainly came out for me.
Yeah. There's so much I want to unpack in your answer. Like you've given so much, and thank you for the honesty and really, it's not easy. Like leadership is an ever like growing, evolving journey, and you are not the same leader with the different teams sometimes. And like as you grow, but there's so much you said. Like first about consistency. I think I will remember where I read an article about predictability and leadership, like meaning having, as you said, like clear values, clear principles as a leader that your team knows and is familiar with, and the consistency in having the right or the same kind of approach or the same reaction to the same things. And that creates this predictability and that helps in establishing a system where people actually like expect what would be the answer, or and at some point they start integrating those the feedback that you give, the direction that you give, and you start feeling that you are less repeating yourself as a leader and always giving the same feedback, because it is very clear, it is consistent how we how you approach certain situations and how we deal with it as a team. And that what takes you into like really making sure that you create a system within the team that can integrate 80 or 90% of it, because it is systematic and it is consistent and it is
100%. Can I say something about predictability though? I think it's, you can be like predictably bad. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I have also learned that, like, I think I'm fairly predictable, but sometimes like predictably breaking the rules, right? So how do I, because consistency is like a different type of muscle, right? It's like holding your ground on a principle that we've like collectively agreed upon, or at least I've stated as like this is the principle upon which how we will work, and holding myself to that principle even when it's hard, so that I am predictable in a way that uh, has a positive outcome. Because I have certainly also been predictable about, like, she's gonna be tired at the end of this thing. And so if you like, I mean, deadlines are an easy one to use, but if you like ask her in a certain way, she's gonna predictably respond in this way that has not allowed for like consistent decision making.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Clear, clear. Yeah, I agree. And then I think also you mentioned something about the polarity of execution versus compassion. And it's we've had a whole conference about leadership polarities, like all the tensions that the leader needs to hold all the time, like the opposing tensions, whether it's like being in the present versus being in the future, being task oriented versus being people oriented. Like we like as leaders have to deal with so much opposing tensions or concepts every day in our leadership, and it's not always easy. And our advice is always to understand or know what is the limit of something, when you are too much in here, too much there, and then you have to regain balance, because being staying too much in execution is not a good thing, and staying too much in compassion is also not a good thing. So having the right balance, doing both together, having a compassionate execution, like like
Yeah.
it is hard to get there, but that's the maybe a place where you would feel comfortable and the team, and it's never gonna stay the same. Like sometimes you go through a phase where you need to be more on this side than on the other side, so it's a constant dance between the
Yeah.
two tensions, and
100%.
it's not easy.
100%. And like what's right? You know what I mean? Like, I think what I've settled on is I will be clear. I will be clear about my expectations. I will be clear about what you can depend on me for.
Mhm.
And in turn, I would like that reciprocated, right? So you may not like it. It may not be the way you would choose to lead the team. But while I'm leading, this is what the universe will look like, right? And I think you can opt in or opt out. I have always tried to stay open to feedback on how to make the universe a better universe that works, right? Because if you have people on your team that feel that they're thriving, they can share, they can do their best work, like this is wonderful. Like we want this, right? But there's always a parameter, right? The organization has parameters. And so if I can at least create a universe that we understand, then I feel like it allows for agency, right? For people to know what to expect and how much space they have to maneuver inside of this universe, and that we are co-creating it, right? You don't just kind of lead and then your word is it, right? Like how people show up every day creates the space. When people remember each other's birthdays, when they do kind things for each other, when they hold each other to account, right? When they say, well, actually, you said you were going to do that and you didn't do it. Like this creates the culture inside of this universe that maybe has nothing to do with me. And, I've always wanted people on my team to feel empowered in that way, that they are able to shift the culture of the team in positive ways. And at the same time, speaking of tension, that because people can also shift the culture in ways that are unpleasant, that I will always be vigilant enough to hold space to be looking out for that we can co-create to the degree that things are still positive and good for the universe we're creating.
I love every word you said, Mazuba, really. The agency, again, I need to clarify something. Like psychological safety is not on the shoulder of the leader. Like every person in the team is responsible to maintain this environment. As you said, being kind to each other also is about saying tough things to each other and being in the trust that that's not gonna affect the relationship, because we trust the intention, we trust that we are in a safe space where we are sharing what is in the best of the person, of the team. And when we are all in this type of thinking or having this like clarity on how we behave together as a team, then it will all only lead to better results. If we give each other feedback honestly, we will only be able to do better next time. And that's what actually sex safety is about. At the end of the day, what it leads to is better learning, better innovation, and more performance as a result of that. And it's beautiful because you really like put your finger on the exact like behavior that this really promotes, and being kind in every way, even if that means saying something to your face that you might maybe not like now, but it's gonna be positive for you and for the team. Love that. I will take one more question. Maybe we talked a lot about the behaviors where it's a good sign that we have psych safety. Zainab asks about what are red flags or signals that a leader notices in a team that might tell them that maybe psych safety is declining and I need to do something about it. Like, would there be any behaviors that for you is a red flag and needs to lead to a new conversation around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you guys are the experts here and can speak to this according to like the ways we're defining psychological safety. But um, I think as a leader, it's important to know your team,
Mm.
to know what optimum looks like. Because if you don't benchmark, right, it's sometimes hard to know like how we're doing. But I think if you're listening, you can listen for what is not being said. You can listen for what is trying to be said in multiple ways. I generally try to stay as vigilant as I can and as plugged into the team members as I can. But when you're working fast, sometimes you'll have a team member that's not complaining about anything and you think things are going well, but actually they've been struggling with something that they don't want to tell you, right? So I think listening to what's being said and not said.
Mm.
Um, when you put out a question, right? Sometimes I'll put out a question to the team, hey, let's do this thing. And if there's like silence, I think the silence is telling me something, right? It could be telling me, and to be open to what it could be telling me. It could be telling me nobody wants to do it. It could be telling me everybody wants to do it and they don't know who should speak first, right? Like, let me investigate as to what the silence is. Um, I think that when work is being done and it may not be being done to the level that you want, I think there's something that you're hearing there. So there could be a number of red flags,
Totally.
but I think one, listen carefully, um, set your own expectations explicitly so that if they're not met or when they're not met, because people are humans and this happens, you can understand what's going on. um yeah, and just listen and talk. I think that's where you
Beautiful.
can tease things out. And I think for me, actually, I probably learned the most about my team when we were not talking about a project, right? Like when we were playing a game
Right.
that was unrelated and somebody said like, oh, I hate when that happens, or I love to do this thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. Okay, amazing. Can I give you more of this type of work? Yes, I'd love it. Oh, and maybe too, like, I think it's so important to be like deeply invested in what people enjoy. Even if you may not have the scope to give them more of that type of work, staying plugged in to what people are learning about. So, when a project finishes, what did you love about that project? What would you want to have done more? Or did you hate about it? But like, just being really, really invested in people's desires, I think tells you a lot and has told me a
Okay.
lot.
Lovely. Like so many gems there, Mazuba. Like a lot of leadership lessons. I'm sure leaders listening are maybe like resonating, but also learning new things. And I hope so. And as you said, like tuning in, listening, active listening, because and actually the data says that in the fearless organization research that was recently made, it showed that the leader always has a better perception of the psych safety of the team than the team itself. So if you compare the rating of the leader versus the rating of the team members, you would always see that the leader thinks things are better than they actually are. So and it's normal.
Wishes.
No, no, because also there will be maybe people actually hide it because not because they are maybe not listening. Looks that depends on the situation, but it might be the case where people actually don't want to show. They see it as a sign
Mm,
of weakness, etc. So
mm,
and on that, and you said it like when you have a diverse team, you also need to be attuned to the normal type of diversity that you have when you have people coming from different cultures, different places, with different backgrounds. They might not react the same way to the same behavior, and then here like it adds another layer of complexity because like very naturally as a human beings we are wired depending on where we grew up in which culture. There's some behaviors like in some culture if someone will stand up in a meeting and challenge the leader, they would take it as it's constructive and like someone is engaged and has and in other cultures it will be taken as disrespectful, especially when it's in a group setting. So
yeah.
really and for that actually we use the Erin Mayer culture map to, uh, to make this explicit. I don't know if I'm able to share my screen, but um, it's a great tool. We can post it in the resources later to show you that where we sit as like people coming from different culture, where we sit on the spectrum of communication. Like you have a lot of cultures where they are very high context in how they communicate versus the one who are low context. Like we can have a million example of, let's say, Are you like someone who's asked maybe, are you available to meet tomorrow? They will simply answer no, and then they move on. And you might think that it's rude, but they are just like really being themselves in the way they answer. So being understanding of also the cultures where these people come from and what does that like what do they carry with that in terms of behaviors, it's also really important, and I think you resonate with
Oh
that.
yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, you know, I'm maybe far more direct than people
Yeah.
would appreciate. And I certainly have had to think about how that's received, right? Because you're trying to do a balance of being yourself and wanting people to know you and to be known. But if it is in such a way that people can't hear it, that defeats the purpose, right? So how
Mm,
to, and not all the time. Like there are certain times when you're trying to communicate something specific, and
totally.
understanding how people listen is helpful for that.
Great, totally. And you also touch upon the importance of rituals and personal time spent with the team outside, and that also helps a lot in understanding what people really think about things, or like what is their natural belief. And those conversations usually don't happen in the context of work; they happen outside of it. So that's the importance of having a regular time where you spend time together as a team, even if it is the team is remote. We have tons of ideas. I think at some point in time, everyone was remote, and like we learned that even if we are not in the same room, there is still ways where we can learn more about each other, personalities, habits, family situation. Like all of this come into play in the way we show up at work, and inviting people to really be themselves can also help a lot in having good levels of psych safety, a lot under the inclusion actually domain. Um, a lot of interesting things, takeaways. Thank you, Mazuba. Maybe I have one last question. Is there an advice you have for leaders who are considering running the psychological safety scan?
um, yeah, sure. One, do it. You know, do it. I don't think you can only learn from it. Be open to hearing things that maybe you didn't want to hear. Um, yeah, and maybe just like listen with a big heart, right? That no matter how good you're doing, like you said, you can always improve. Um, and create the space for it to be impactful, right? So, you know, again, you can think that you're like hitting it out the park as a leader. You're like, I've got inclusion down. I know everybody feels great, like I created the space, and then that's not the case. And it's hard, right? Like when you're trying to balance 100 things and you think you're doing a good job, you may not be doing a good job. Um, but I think, reflection and listening only just benefits us, right? So whatever's like kind of comes up, just like work with it, learn from it, uh, and you too will be transformed through it. So try it, see how it goes, share, let us know. Let's like keep learning as a community of leaders.
So I love the advice to reflect. Sometimes we, especially here in this part of the world, like we are working so fast, like we are always in the following thing, and we don't take time to pause and really understand what happened, what we want to do about it. Like you did the beautiful thing by reflecting about what did this exercise teach me as a leader, and what are the behaviors or the things that I want to change or maybe do a bit differently or make more explicit. And that's in those moments where we actually really take a step forward and grow in our leaders journey. And you had really beautiful things
Yeah.
to say today.
And maybe too, just like sometimes, like you reflect with yourself, but reflect out loud,
With
because
the
sometimes
team.
when you reflect alone, you can create your own conclusions, and it's really great to check in with people. Like, did I hear that right? A month later.
everything. Totally. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really loved and enjoyed the conversation. Thank you again for your openness and honesty. We are almost at the hour. I didn't feel the time passing. And I want to thank everyone who stayed in and listened. I've been getting messages of people enjoying the conversation. Thank you so much. We loved having you with us, Mazuba, for this session of the Psych Safety and Focus webinar. The energy, the question, the reflection you shared really reminded us how much it's important to really be intentional about our leadership. And if you'd like to go deeper, we have plenty of resources that we're going to share with you, whether in the chat or you can check it on our website about psychological safety and how to implement it in your team. This is only like the beginning of the kind of awareness we would like to bring into this region about this concept. So sign up to our newsletter, follow us on our channel, and really keep your eye out for the announcement of the next webinar coming soon. I think the next one is going to be specifically focused on inclusion and diversity. So stay tuned. Thank you again for being part of this journey with us. Looking forward always, Mazuba, for more conversation with you. Thank
Yes, Melly, thank you so much. Thank you for holding the space as gently and kindly as you always do.
you.
Thank you to Cosmic for just being an incredible group of amazing humans that I will talk to and want to talk to always.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our session today and looking forward for the next ones.
Bye.
Bye.